What is up, guys? Welcome back to Blue Bloods Football, and I hope you are all doing well today. As shown by the title and or the caption, our possible managerial prospects for if and when Potter leaves this club and is eventually sacked. I'm just going to start off by structuring the video in such a way that starts off by mentioning what I think personally this club needs in terms of personality traits and values that we must hold strong in order to help us, maintain good run of performances and get us to a relatively high standard. The things I think this club needs are discipline, mentality, which is a big one. I think that should be number one, and some form of a culture of the two, a culture of mentality and discipline, basically. And like I mentioned in my previous video, that the best clubs, in my opinion, are ones with those of a strong culture of discipline and mentality. Madrid, for example, look at how big their club is and how much they've won together. There is a standing culture of discipline and mentality in that team, in that they do not let anyone at the club become bigger than the club. No one has successfully been bigger than Real Madrid, in my opinion. Raul came close and he left. Ronaldo came very close and he left. The moment that happens, where a player starts to think they're bigger than the club, or it turns out that it's just, happens to go in that direction, the club will generally get rid of them in a sense, or they leave. Ronaldo demanded a certain amount of pay. The club did not agree to his terms and he felt like he had to leave. And I think that was very good on them. Obviously, they lost their top goal scorer, but, they struggled at the beginning and eventually they came to, because they were Madrid, and that will never change no matter who comes and goes. Coaches, players, managers, board members, and that's what we need as a Chelsea team. We can't build the team around, we can build the team around certain individuals and players, but I'm not talking about the team as a whole as Chelsea. Culturally, we should be Chelsea as a whole, and we should maintain that culture. Whoever comes and goes is temporary. Everyone's temporary. Players, coaches don't get attached, because it's all about who can deliver the best for this team, who can carry this team the best, and that's all you contribute to this team in terms of value. Not because you become famous and you're an Eden Hazard or Didier Drogba or Frank Lampard, whatever. Everything you do is for the team, and that helps the team progress. Think about the badge, not the individual players or the manager. That's what we need. That culture, that hard staying mentality, no matter how bad things get. During games, during a bad run of results, we still manage to keep our heads high and we know who we are. We know that we are Chelsea and there's a standard to maintain, and we should always work to maintain that standard or rise above it. That's the minimum we should have at this club, and that's how it's kind of always been. Things have obviously changed since the new owners have arrived. I'm not sure exactly what identity they want this club to have, but in my opinion, that's what should be done. So now that we know what the team needs, it's time to see what coach can try provide these aspects to the players as a whole, and the team, of course. So I'm going to go and make a list, see list of 4 possible coaches, right? And I'm going to add in 1 or 2 coaches that are actually more probable if Potter gets the sacking. But 4 possible coaches, in my opinion, that would be able to give the team essentially what it needs, like I said before. So I'm going to give pros and cons of each one as well. So stay tuned. Number 4 is good old Jose Mourinho. Now, personally, I would have never put him in the list before, but I started looking at other YouTubers and what they said about why he might be a good candidate. A lot of them had him as a number 1, to be honest. And in terms of pros, I would think that, yes, Mourinho knows the club more than any other coach that we could possibly get right now that I can think of. He is a proven winner, 100%. One thing he's known for is a strong mentality and zero tolerance. He can definitely provide discipline throughout the ranks of his team, which is what a lot of these players need. A lot of them are a bit entitled, have weak mentalities, and that could do from a Mourinho makeover, you know what I mean? So he can definitely provide those aspects, in my opinion, and those are the pros, I think. Tactically, I have no issues with him. A lot of people find his football boring, but personally, I've outgrown trying to see entertaining football and kind of just care about the results. I don't care if rival fans are like, oh, they defended for 80 minutes and last 10 minutes they attacked and got a goal, they robbed the match. I don't care. At the end of the day, it says 1-0, not 1-0 in brackets flashy football. Don't be a child. My cons with this appointment are that inevitably Mourinho always breaks down by the second or third season, and that has happened at pretty much every club he's gone to, including Chelsea. So for us to hire him as a coach knowing that there's a very high probability things are just going to collapse, I think is going to be kind of like, it's almost suicidal. Like, you're getting into something that is not going to be permanent. At the end of the day, the bit I understand from the owners is that they want something that's a bit longer lasting, and they want a whole process thing and something more permanent. And I think, which is why I'm making this video, as to why I think it'd be better suited with another manager instead of Potter. Like, for example, Mourinho has never really worked on a basis of trying to build something from the ground up. Like, Roma is the first club he mentioned where he's like, this is the first time they're giving me a job where it's not like they demand results immediately. And that's going relatively well. I mean, he's had some turmoil in the recent times, but it's going relatively well. So I think it'd be interesting for him to adapt to what the owners want if he were to come to Chelsea, but I don't know if he would be able to get there. I don't think they'll be as harsh on him as the previous owners, of course. I think he will be given more time. I think he'll have minimum 3 seasons, even if the third season goes bad, like minimum. And a lot of what the other YouTubers were saying, that disappointment would only work if he comes in and he gets like a very good assistant manager such as a John Terry or whatever to take over after those like 3 seasons or so. But obviously a lot has to go in place for that to happen, and I don't think the owners are gonna go in that direction. So, and by the way, choice number 3 and 2 for me are interchangeable, so I wouldn't mind either one. I'd say joint second place actually, for the sake of my opinion. I would say Zinedine Zidane and Hansi Flick. Now, in terms of pros, I'm going to start with Zidane. Zidane, like Mourinho, commands authority in a slightly different way than Mourinho does, but either or, they both command authority. Unlike Potter, no offense, like Potter doesn't really walk in the room and you're like, yo, respect Potter. Zidane walks into a room and you're like, yo, respect Zidane for what he does as a player and a manager. The guy just screams boss vibes. Like, me and a friend were discussing recently that he actually looks like a movie character. He's got those movie character boss vibes, Agent 47 kind of vibes. And Ancelotti, for example, has that too. They kind of have that quiet or authoritative kind of vibe to them where they can walk in a room and command respect, you know what I mean, and not have to berate players or shout to get people's attention. They just do it through their actions. They maintain a certain standard, if I can say it like that. If you don't meet that standard, then you just don't make the cut. And that's pretty much known throughout the teams they've coached in history. Well, I mean, Zidane with Madrid. And what's impressive about Zidane, as an ex-player, like, I respect the way he actually went through the ranks. Instead of just getting his coaching badges and going straight into coaching like a team or whatever based off his connections, he went and did the bare minimum. Like, he did so much. People forget how long he was actually at Madrid before he became the head coach. Before he was even an assistant coach at Madrid, he used to coach under 23s, under 21s, the reserves, I mean the Madrid B team and stuff. He did a lot of groundwork. And it was obvious because he came into the first team with a plan, and you could see he automatically knew exactly what he wanted to do because he's thought of this moment for ages and he planned. Just like I lauded Tuchel for doing the same thing before he came to Chelsea. You know what I mean? And what I have against Potter for coming in and being like, okay, new job, let me plan from scratch now. It doesn't make sense. So, in that regard, and tactically I have no issues with him. His tactics seem relatively solid. Guy knows what he's doing most of the time. And he'll definitely get respect out of his players for sure, and he maintains that standard. So definitely, and plus he seems like the kind of guy, like, relatively youthful, who has that long-term thing to him. Like, if guys wanted to build a long-term project around Zidane, I think it would work, and I think he would work well with it. Not so much pressure in the Premier League. I think he'll take on aspects of the Premier League well, because the Premier League's not just about the matches and the toughness of the matches. It's about the environment and how hectic the fans can get, and how hectic your own fans can get, like fans booing their own players and stuff. And on top of like a bad result, you'd get a bunch of journalists coming in and asking you stupid questions. He's got a calm, cool mentality. I mean, barring certain head-butting incidents, I think he's grown since then. Cons, damn, I don't have many cons when it comes to Zidane, to be honest. I think he's quite a good candidate. I'd say biggest cons that this guy has no interest whatsoever in coming to England. I think he's made that quite apparent. And right now, what is he, like a representative or something of the Grand Prix, whatever. I don't know. I don't really care that much about Grand Prix, but apparently he's in that field now. So I think they could ask him if he wanted to pull through, and you'd just be like, no thanks, in Spanish or French. So sorry if you noticed a slight change in the camera angles, guys. I had to leave, and when I came back, the sun was fully in my spot. So yeah. So for my next candidate, as I mentioned already, Hansi Flick. Like I already mentioned that, you know, any candidates on my list kind of has the meets the basic criteria of being able to provide what I feel the club needs. If you look at Hansi Flick, bro, first of all, you look at this guy's face, you can see he's a hard man with a low level of tolerance, which is kind of also what I feel we need. Obviously a bit of understanding is great, but I think some of the players have gone way past that point, eh? Potter's the extreme, basically. Hansi Flick is the opposite end of the extreme of Potter, you know what I mean? Hard man, zero tolerance, has a set standard. If you don't meet it, you're out. Soft guy, okay if you don't make it, participation trophy kind of vibes, you know what I mean? So in this regard, I feel like, yeah, Hansi Flick has a clear identity of how he wants his team to play. Looking at him at Bayern Munich, obviously those guys were monsters. Like, those guys look like roided up beasts. Everyone was scared to play them in the Champions League. We all caught hands from them, Chelsea included. Every London team, I feel like, I swear they went through Tottenham, not Arsenal because no Champions League. And yeah, Barca, didn't they? Like, was it 8-2 or something? Can't remember. But yeah, they obviously have a clear identity. They had a clear identity from Hansi Flick. He imposed his beliefs and his structure into that team, which is exactly what I felt like Potter was missing. He didn't come with a set plan. What Hansi Flick seems to have some set idea as to how he wants his team to play. Hard man, disciplinarian, zero tolerance, like I said. Discipline like this team needs. As for the culture at Chelsea, he kind of fits the old school culture more than the new school. The new owners that are trying to get that like long-term thing going. That's the only thing about him. Those are all pros I mentioned. In terms of cons, he strikes me as a short-term solution, just like Mourinho kind of thing, except minus the pro of actually knowing the club as well as Mourinho does in the old culture. But he's definitely slightly more modern, if I could say it like that. Very entertaining football. Like I said, I don't really care much for entertaining football. I just want a result at this point. But yeah, he definitely provides it for sure. And yes, we can't really compare ourselves to Bayern, and they had stars in that team, but he definitely used his tools well to his disposal. His cons are that can he do it outside of Germany kind of vibes, because I mean, he was a German assistant coach, and he became a coach of Bayern Munich, and then he became a coach of Germany. He did well as an assistant coach, I guess, him and Joachim Löw together. And at Bayern Munich, he did exceptionally well, of course, Champions League and all. And then when he started running Germany, they were terrible, as you could see from the World Cup. So that's my early fault. I guess they did well in the friendlies leading up to the World Cup and stuff. But yeah, World Cup form or international team form, it's very hard to compare to club level. They're completely different styles of play or whatever in football and stuff. So yeah, that's it when it comes to Hansi Flick, to be honest. As for my final candidates, who people are probably going to raise an eyebrow at, I'm going to say Julien Nagelsmann. And by the way, ChatGPT agreed with me on this. So yeah, it's an interesting aspect. And why I say him is that, first of all, there was a reason we actually touted him before Thomas Tuchel. He was at Leipzig at the time, and his time was running out there, and he was seeking a new club, I think. Bayern Munich wasn't that interested at the time, but eventually they snatched him up. And it was a thing of like, do we fire Lampard now and go for like an interim or someone temporary, which was Tuchel, because we hired him on a short-term contract, and it panned out very well because he won the Champions League, so that made sense. Or do we wait for Lampard to finish off the season and then sack him and get a new coach, which is simpler to do at the end of a season, like Nagelsmann, which was the primary idea. So it didn't work out, and I think Nagelsmann will be perfect for this team, given the fact that he's a young coach. He can relate to young players well. He has like an Arteta kind of vibe, minus the long-term longevity thing that, you know, Arteta took a while to implement his plans. And I think Nagelsmann has more coaching experience than Arteta, so it might be simpler for him. He did very well with Leipzig. Not too many great players on his side, but he turned them into world beaters, put them on the map, you know. Sabitzer, I think, Yusuf Poulsen, Timo Werner. I don't know if Nkunku was there at the time, I think he was. But yeah, he did very well with those players. And to compete in the Bundesliga, where Bayern Munich is always tough competition every year, he did quite well, plus Dortmund. So yeah, big ups to him for that. Plus, like I said, he can relate to the players well. He seems to have that level of patience and that quiet authority. So he's somewhere in between that Ancelotti, Zidane type quiet, hard authority and the Hansi Flick-esque Jose Mourinho, more hard man kind of authority. Somewhere in between. He's not necessarily fully on either side. Somewhere in between, which is definitely would suit our club well. And he seems more long-term than most of the coaches I've mentioned, except Zidane. And cons, I don't see any cons. Oh, tactically, sorry, by the way, tactically, he's quite decent as well. I don't know so much about his tactics, but they seem to be working well at Bayern Munich currently, as well as Leipzig. I don't know what issues he had, either with the board or something, not too long ago, which gave me the impression he might become available at that point, but I think those are resolved now.
Breaking news, my friends. I got an update during my late night airs from none other than Fabrizio Romano, stating that young Julien Nagelsmann's job is in jeopardy at Bayern Munich, especially if he loses the next game. Wait, breaking news. Nagelsmann's fired, and Tuchel's head coach. Please excuse the shocked expression on my face.
And he has a great Champions League record with Bayern Munich. The fact that he lost Lewandowski and he's still able to do so well, especially get as many goals as he has currently in the Champions League, is quite astounding. Okay guys, as for managerial options that are most likely probable and have been spoken about in recent reports, it's, from what I saw, it is most likely either Pochettino, who we've already approached and rejected us, I think, according to that one report that I saw, or Luis Enrique, who for me is just a big no-no. I think he's the Spanish version of Graham Potter, no offense. Obviously slightly better, but you know, did great things at Barca, but that was with MSN. But then again, you know, let me not go back on my words. I said if you have the tools, some people can use the tools, some people can't. So he used the tools well in that regard. But after that, it was just complete downhill after every club. I mean, into the fact that yes, he had some issues, family issues. I think his daughter passed away when she was 6, so that's very tragic, and that can obviously always change a man. So not going to be too harsh on him in that regard. But yeah, like looking at the Spanish national team, which is where he's at now currently, like they didn't really have a great World Cup. And the style of play, this enforcing of the tiki-taka, I don't know. Especially when it's not as like vibrant as, you know, old school Barca tiki-taka, which was a lot more entertaining. But when it's just possession for possession's sake and it's like 5,000 passes before an attempt on goal, I'm not looking forward to Chelsea doing that. It's reminiscent of like Sarri ball when it was starting up. Granted that I know it was a process, but like, you know, obviously towards the end of Sarri ball in its prime, like when we saw Napoli in their prime, they were amazing. They were a joy to watch. So that's where I wanted Chelsea to get to be honest. And I think Sarri could have done it, but obviously I think he wanted to go back to Italy. The fans were not happy with the way things were going, and we were definitely spoiled back then. The fact that we made top 4 and we won a Europa League trophy was still not enough for us. It shows the standards at this club, like I said. Arsenal would be doing backflips if they got that kind of result. But yeah, guys, as for Pochettino, I think he's quite a good coach. His stint at PSG didn't really do him any favors. I think he did very well at Tottenham with what he had. They didn't really back him as much as they backed recent coaches that they've had, including Conte. And he did a lot with the minimal resources he had. So it would be good to see him come to Chelsea and try something with like a limited amount of resources. But like I said, at PSG, that was kind of the case. And he drowned. Like, they were terrible in some ways, and he just could not manage some of the egos there. I mean, granted that they're like mega star egos like Mbappe and Neymar, eventually Messi. Yeah, it's still not a good look. So